Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kendrick. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic day. So this is kind of interesting. So I've been trying, and some of you have heard this at times, but my phone has been going off at times. You hear this little, ding sound, and I'm always like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, that's my phone. See, the problem with my phone was, for whatever reason, I couldn't get it to mute itself anymore. I would always, turn down the volume, and they go down all the way, but there's three different types of volume, and one of them wouldn't turn down, and I couldn't figure out why. It's like the bar itself wouldn't move down, so I always had this notification alert sound that I could not turn off, and so I always just had to hope and pray that it wouldn't go off while I was talking, and it did a few times, which was always annoying. But I ended up taking my phone in, and apparently there's this little button slider thing on the side of it that I didn't really know existed, and I didn't really know what it did. And this is one of those moments where I just feel like the people at phone stores just look at me like I'm stupid. I don't know what it is. The times are apparently even passing me by. But I go in, I explain what was wrong with my phone. Dude just took my phone, looked to the side of it, flipped a little switch, and he went, "There you go." And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay. Yep. Sorry about that. Sorry to waste your time. And then I leave the store and I just go, okay, yep, I am never ever going to bring my phone in again. From now on, I'm going to exhaust every single option beforehand before I take it in and end up looking like an idiot. So yeah, that was me a few days ago. Nonetheless, though, we got a lot to talk about today. I want to talk about Buffalo and Seattle. I want to talk about the top 10 picks as it currently stands right now in the NFL draft. I want to talk about the Saints in Tampa, and then I want to get into my top 5 MVP candidates of the NFL season thus far. We're basically halfway through the season, and so now is I think a good time to actually look at who are the MVP favorites halfway through the season. So let's get into this. All right, so Buffalo and Seattle. Going into the game, I thought Seattle would struggle just because of their defense, but I thought that they would have a chance to beat Buffalo because Josh Allen up until then hadn't really been playing the same, right? The first 4 weeks of the season, he was an MVP candidate, and then the next 4 weeks, he was like, okay. He wasn't performing exactly as well as he had been. His completion percentage was going down, and then even when his completion percentage was actually high, all his down-the-field passes his down-the-field passing was the problem. Everything was just kind of dinking and dunking he was able to complete, and it seemed like defenses had kind of figured out Josh Allen, right? He came into the season, and he was shocking people because of just this leap he took, but then defenses seemed to kind of figure out exactly what it is he was doing. He still is kind of like a first read quarterback. He stands flat-footed a lot. He gets locked in on receivers. The thing was his offensive line was giving him time. He's got 3 really, really good wide receivers, and he was taking advantage of it. Then as soon as John Brown was kind of in and out of the lineup, he's missing some games, he's back in for some games, it really kind of changes their offense. And Josh Allen just didn't look as good. Some teams were able to heat him up a bit more, and against Seattle, you would think Seattle won this game. If I was to tell you that Seattle's going to drop 30-plus points on a Bills defense that was not very good, and Josh Allen was going to be sacked 7 times, you would think that, oh, okay, so Seattle's pass rush came alive, that Carlos Dunlap was a big addition, and Russell Wilson cooked their defense, and they probably blew out Buffalo. No, that actually wasn't the case. So I want to talk about this from a few different angles. I want to talk about Seattle first, right? So my takeaway from Seattle. Teams have made a decision on Russell Wilson. They're going to blitz him, and they're going to make him make a quick decision. They're going to hit him repeatedly, and what it's showing it's going to do is it's going to make Russell Wilson turn the football over. Here's something I'm noticing teams are doing, and this is a bit hard to show because I don't have any video to accompany this with it or anything. This is just my voice, so I'm going to do my best to explain this to people. One thing I'm noticing teams are doing now to Russell Wilson is they're putting 6 on the line. So 6 against the offensive line. So there's always technically going to be a free man rushing, especially if it's in an empty set, right? No running back. What I'm noticing teams are doing is they're going to that formation a lot. And they are either sending 6, or they're dropping one guy out and they're sending the rest. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to either confuse Russell Wilson or they're trying to force him to make a quick decision, right? So let's just say they send 6. Buffalo sent 6 at one point. We have seen this now 3 straight games for Seattle. It happened against the Cardinals. It happened what was Seattle's last game? Against the Niners, and it has happened against Buffalo. If they send 6, there's a free rusher. Russell Wilson needs to make a quick decision, either try and juke the guy, or just throw through him, or he's gonna not see him and he's gonna take the hit. It happened against Buffalo, he took the hit. It happened against the Cardinals, he either took the hit, was able to get away, or against the Cardinals overtime, they go to that same kind of formation. Budda Baker drops out. They send the rest, but Budda Baker drops out. Russell Wilson didn't see him. He probably expected him to still be blitzing, and Budda Baker intercepts him. And it happened again at San Francisco. It's just Russell Wilson was able to counteract it, and he was able to make some plays. But that is what teams are now doing to Russell Wilson. They are forcing him to make quick decisions, and I think that part of this is also Russell Wilson knows he needs to make the play. He knows he can't just sit back and take the sack. He doesn't have a defense to lean on. He knows he needs to go into every game, and he needs to score like 30. Seattle is no longer a control-the-ball offense. Maybe they could be if they changed the passing game a bit to more short intermediate stuff and they didn't look for constant long balls to DK and to Lockett. Maybe you'd be better that way. But as it stands right now, Russell Wilson needs to score 30-plus points every single game, and I think he's starting to press. He pressed against the Cardinals. He then didn't really need to press against the Niners, but then he pressed against Buffalo. And you see what happened against the Cardinals. 3 turnovers against Buffalo. 4 turnovers. Not only did Seattle lose that game, but Russell Wilson, he's starting to lose his lead in the MVP race. Now, as it stands right now, I think I still have Russell Wilson as my MVP, because at least I just know what he's working with. But that's not how the MVP award works. When all your big televised games, you're kind of putting up stinkers against the Cardinals, big night game, laid an egg. And then against the Bills, a big early time game, laid an egg. When these are your performances you're putting on TV, the voters see it, and they're going to hold that against you. And even though Russell Wilson is going to finish this season with one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and it's going to be, he is once again going to be the bulk of the Seattle offense, whether it be the running game and the passing game. Even though Russell Wilson's probably going to finish this season with the most touchdown passes, he'll be like top 3 in yards, one of the most efficient quarterbacks when his grading and everything. Even though that's where he's going to finish, and he'll finish as one of the best teams in the NFC and in the NFL. I think they'll be a double-digit win team. They could win 12, 11 games. And the narrative and the story, everything is so great for Russell Wilson. When you start having these kind of performances against these kinds of teams in these kind of time spots where everyone sees it, it magnifies it. And I think they will hold it against him. And man, Seattle's going to get him killed. Did you see AJ Klein in Buffalo? Russell Wilson, when does he ever take a massive hit? When has Russell Wilson ever really taken a huge shot? I know what's happened, but I can't really name him. Against Buffalo, he got hit repeatedly. Buffalo knocked him to the ground 11 times. They sacked him, I think, 5. What were there, 12 total sacks for the whole game between both teams? You think this was like a defensive showing, but then you look at the scoreboard, and that's when you just go, you sit back and you say, yep, this is the NFL nowadays. This is the way scoring is. You can have teams with multiple sacks, and the other team can still drop like 40. This is the worst defense Pete Carroll has ever had. I don't know if Pete Carroll has ever had a defense worse than this. Going into the season, I knew they weren't going to have a pass rush, but I at least thought their secondary would be able to do something. Shaquille Griffin coming off of his best season, and Dunbar coming off of his best season, and you still got Flowers there, and you make a trade for Jamal frickin' Adams, and Quandre Diggs was fitting in great in the Seattle defense. I thought they'd be able to do something, and Bobby Wagner's still there, and KJ Wright is still there, and they just drafted a rookie middle linebacker. I thought they'd be able to do something, and they just haven't. They're one of the worst teams in the league, and when it comes to getting pressure and sacking the quarterback. They are the worst team against the pass. The only thing they're really good at is the run, and it's because teams just know they don't need to run the football. They can pass so easily against this defense, they don't even need to run the football. Did you see the Buffalo Bills? Did you see what they tried? They didn't even make an attempt to establish a run. They just said, Josh, throw us to victory. You got this. They have nobody on that defense. And I guess this is kind of when I want to get into this, because I don't want people to overblow Josh Allen's performance, right? Now, Seattle's defense, in my opinion, is like the elixir to a quarterback in a slump. If your quarterback's in a slump, if they're struggling, if their confidence isn't that high, just go have them face the Seattle defense, and I promise you they're going to feel better about themselves. Because by the end of that game, they're probably going to have thrown 300 plus yards, probably like 3 or 4 touchdowns, and hell, Seattle's defense doesn't really get takeaways, so they're also not going to even turn the football over. They'll feel good, and they'll head into the next game probably riding high. I think that's going to happen for Josh Allen. I don't know who they face next. I don't know who the Bills' next opponent is, but I think Josh Allen, his confidence right now after that game is at a 10. It could possibly even be higher. This is Seattle's defense, though, right? Seattle's defense. They have one cornerback in the top 50 by Pro Football Focus. Ugo Amadi. And he's like ranked in the 40s. Jamal Adams, he was their big trade acquisition. He's ranked 46th among safeties. Now part of it is because he's been injured. Part of it I think is because it is a new scheme. So he's getting used to that. They're needing to play from, they're in shootouts a lot, so it's not like his performance even then is necessarily helping. Seattle does use him all over the place the way the Jets did, but he's ranked 46th among safeties. So that's great. The best part of Seattle's defense by far is their front 7. They have 2 linebackers in the top 10, Wagner and KJ Wright. I think Wagner's number 2, and KJ Wright's number 9. They don't have a single edge rusher in the top 50. Poona Ford, their defensive tackle, is ranked 14th among interior defenders, though. So they have one defensive lineman in general ranked in the top 50, and it ain't even the D tackle that they paid in Jarran Reed. It isn't even him. It's Poona Ford. I mean, that is just ridiculous. This is the defense. And I say all that then to also kind of say this. They got 7 sacks against Buffalo. They got 7. Really? How bad is Buffalo's pass protection? How bad is their offensive line? Like, if Seattle is getting 7 sacks against you, if a defensively challenged team is getting 7 sacks against you, there's a problem. 7 sacks on most days would beat the quarterback. If your team is getting 7 sacks, I think all of us would agree, you would think your team blew out the other team. There's a saying in football, pressure breaks pipes. When the quarterback gets pressured, hands in the face, getting hit to the ground repeatedly, got all those bodies falling on them, the weaker quarterbacks, they kind of crumble, and their play crumbles with them. But the tougher quarterbacks are the ones who get up off that ground, dust themselves off, go right on to the next play, and Josh Allen appears to be that dude. I mean, he appears to be a guy who can just shake it off at this point. He trusts his mechanics, he trusts the process, and I know a lot of people were kind of looking at Josh Allen throughout that stretch of football where his numbers weren't looking that great, and they were saying maybe Buffalo should still look to move off of him. I don't know if I agree with that. I think this kind of play from Josh Allen, I think he can only get better, really. I don't think that this is something where we're gonna see a regression. I think this is kind of who he is. I think he's a lot like Ben Roethlisberger. He's a lot like Cam Newton. I think he's going to forever be a little bit flawed mechanically. When things are working great and he can, step into his throws and his feet don't get all antsy and he's dancing around, I think his mechanics will be fine, that he can make the requisite throws and he can make them accurately. I think once he does get under pressure, his mechanics will always kind of start to falter. Unless he can absolutely all the way fix it, I think he will always kind of revert back to his old mechanics. So he will probably always be a guy who turns the ball over a little bit more than you want him to. He won't be as accurate all the time as you want him to, but neither is Ben Roethlisberger and neither is Cam Newton. And both of these guys, well, Cam Newton has won an MVP, been to a Super Bowl. Ben Roethlisberger has won 2 Super Bowls, and there's many people who believe he's the best or the most talented Steelers quarterback of all time, depending on him or Bradshaw, whichever one you want to look at. Barring something catastrophic, Josh Allen can play. And he's gonna be good for a really long time. Buffalo seems to have found their guy. They've built around him. They've embraced what he does well. He'll probably never be the perfect mechanical quarterback, everything. He's not Mahomes, he's not Russell, he's not Rodgers, but Big Ben and Cam can win in this league. And he has a better arm than I think both of them. At least it's stronger. He's more mobile than Ben, not as mobile as Cam Newton, but seems to be a better thrower than him earlier in his career. So, yeah, I think Josh Allen, he's going to be good for a long time. And the only thing that's going to stop the Buffalo Bills from winning their division this year, realistically, is themselves. It's not going to be Miami. It's not even going to be New England. And it's not going to be the Jets. They swept the Jets. I think they're going to sweep Miami. And I think they're going to sweep New England. Miami could maybe make it interesting in that final game of the season, especially if it was actually coming down for whatever reason, right? If the Buffalo Bills just collapsed and Miami just continues to be hot. Unless it collapsed and Miami is in position to actually win the division and they're going to give it their all that game, I think this is the Buffalo Bills to lose. And for Seattle fans who watched that game and who were just depressed and upset at watching that outcome and just watching the defense not be able to do anything, even with 7 sacks, not be able to stop Josh Allen. Here is a little bit of the good news. As much as Russell Wilson is a big part of the reason as to why it is that they lost, right? If I had to kind of divvy up blame, I'd probably go 60-40 Russell Wilson. I think a lot of it is the defense, and Russell Wilson is pressing, but he's pressing and he's turning the football over. You can't do that. So I do have to put more blame on Russell Wilson's shoulders, right? 4 turnovers, unacceptable. You cannot do that. You're Russell Wilson. This is let Russ cook, okay? You can't be doing that. You can't be turning the football over like that. But here is what I will say to Seattle fans, and maybe this will make you feel a little bit better. Buffalo only won that game by 10 points. They had 4 turnovers, and they won it only by 10 points. Buffalo needed every single turnover that they got in order to win that game. Kind of the same thing with the Cardinals, right? You are a penalty away from being undefeated. Against Buffalo, hell, if you just had only 3 turnovers, maybe even just 2 turnovers, Seattle probably still would have won that game. Because I believe in Russell Wilson, I believe in Tyler Lockett, I believe in DK Metcalf, I actually believe in Seattle's offensive line. Their offensive line is better than anticipated. They have a rookie in Lewis who's really good, Dwayne Brown is still good, Brandon Shell, at least as a pass blocker, has been better than expected. I think there are bright spots to look at for Seattle, but there's a glaring elephant in the room, and it's what was once referred to as the Legion of Boom. It is now the Legion of Suck at this point. I can't even come up with something clever. No, it's the Legion of suck at this point. It's not good. And Russell Wilson's gonna have to carry this defense. I don't think there's any big moves they can make. Maybe they can bring back Earl Thomas. Who knows? Maybe, hey, pair Jamal Adams with Earl Thomas. That could probably look pretty cool. But I don't think there's any big moves to make for Seattle. Obviously, the trade deadline has come and passed. They tried to trade for Aldon Smith. Cowboys wouldn't part ways with them. I think it's a mistake. But they're trying to still win this year for whatever reason. It's not going well for them. But yeah, it was not a pretty game for Seattle. And Russell Wilson is slowly but surely just destroying his lead in the MVP race, right? There's people out there who already believe Patrick Mahomes is taking the lead. Aaron Rodgers is probably taking the lead. I would still have Russell Wilson there, but that is just because I can see what it is that he's working with. Anyways, coming up next, we're going to get into the top 10 draft order as it currently stands after 9 weeks. That coming up next.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment kind of did a recap of Buffalo versus Seattle. When it comes to Buffalo, hey, great game. Josh Allen got sacked 7 times, and they still won the game by 10 points. He looked incredible. Didn't throw an interception, threw 400 yards, but again, it was the Seattle defense, and the Seattle defense is just not good. It's not good anywhere. They don't really do anything well other than stop the run, and I think the main reason why they're good against the run on paper is because teams know they can pass on them no matter what. And when it comes to Seattle, look, I love Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson right now is still my MVP because I see what it is that he's working with. I understand it, but I'm not gonna lie when I say the gap between him and whoever is in second place, whoever was in third place for MVP, it has shortened by a lot. In just 2 games, Cardinals and against the Bills, he has 7 turnovers, and they're all him. It's not like he was throwing to a receiver and then they fumbled the football. No, it's all him. Interceptions, fumbles. Did you guys know that Aaron Rodgers and Mahomes on the season, I think they have combined for 2 turnovers? That matters. It does matter in the end of it. Even if we all know that Russell Wilson is Seattle's whole show, he is the reason they are 6-2. He is the reason they are atop their division, even if we can all see it. It matters what you do in big televised games that everyone is paying attention to. And in 2 of those games, he has stunk it up and they've lost. So, plain and simple. That's just kind of what it is. Anyways, so I've been doing a lot of looking at the draft. Obviously, a lot of people are talking about this upcoming NFL draft, Trevor Lawrence and Trey Lance and Justin Fields, all the prospects that are in it. There's a lot of prospects who opted out of this season so that they could just prepare for the NFL draft. But most people believe this is going to be a quarterback-heavy first round, especially for the top 5 picks. They expect guys like Trevor Lawrence and Fields and Lance to all go. And now there's the kid at BYU, Wilson, who's now being talked about as a first-round quarterback. And it got me thinking about who the top 10 picks are. So I ended up finding out these are the current top 10 picks as it stands. So going from number 1 to 10, Jets, Jags, Cowboys, Giants, Washington, Chargers, Dolphins, via Houston, Bengals, Panthers, Falcons. Okay, the Jets are 0-9. They almost beat New England, which I think probably scared Jets fans more than the fact that they lost it. They were terrified if they'd win it. Joe Flacco was dealing, and for a bit there, I honestly thought the Jets were going to win it going away, but then Flacco kind of reverted back into Flacco, and even though on paper, you look at the stat sheet, he was great. On the stat sheet, he was great, but he threw a horrible interception. He had a tight end wide open in the flat that would have been for an easy first down, and he went for the long ball, and he threw a pick to J.C. Jackson, and ultimately, he threw away the game. So, that is what it is. I guess it is worth noting though, right? If the Jets did win that game, they would be tied with Jacksonville right now, and I think the Jets would still technically have the number 1 pick. But do people realize that Jacksonville has the hardest remaining schedule in the NFL? They have the hardest remaining, even tougher than the Jets, who came into the season with a top 5 schedule in terms of strength. I mean, the Jets almost screwed themselves by almost winning that game. They almost screwed themselves. And I know a lot of people were kind of making jokes about the Jets because they pointed out at one point that the Jets had 12 men on the field, gave New England a fresh set of downs, they went and they capitalized with a touchdown. Some people were saying, see, that's peak tanking right there. See what the Jets did right there? The Jets, they put 12 people out there. They said, no, New England, no. You're not kicking the field goal here. No, you're getting a touchdown. You're not going to kick a field goal against us. We need you to beat us. We're not trying to win games this season. We're trying to get Trevor Lawrence. Don't you dare kick that field goal. And New England, of course, they go on and they win the game. But looking at the top 10, and more specifically, when I look at the top 5, or maybe even to narrow it down a bit more, the top 4 draft picks, Jets, Jags, Cowboys, Giants. I think that those 4 teams are going to remain the 4 worst teams in the NFL. The Jets, I don't see a single win on the remainder of their schedule. They are 0-9. I don't see a single win on the remainder of their schedule. If I was going to give the Jets a win anywhere, I would either say against the Dolphins, just because I think Greg Williams will heat Tua up and I think he would force him into some mistakes, or I would say the Chargers. Do people remember the Chargers lost to the winless Browns back in what was it? Was it 2016? 2016, 2015? They lost to the winless Browns. I would not put it past the Chargers to choke again, and I think if they did lose to the Jets, that would be the nail in the coffin for Andy Lynn's head coaching career with the Chargers. And it might even be in general. I think that there's a lot of teams out there that would look at that and go, yeah, we're not going to touch him again. But other than that, I don't see a single win on the Jets schedule. Jaguars, again, I look at the remainder of their schedule. I mean, Packers and Pittsburgh and the Browns and all these. I don't see a single win on their schedule. I just don't. I think the Jaguars will be a 1-15 team. When it comes to the Cowboys, it's kind of the same thing. Their schedule is just hard. And I get, they pushed Pittsburgh to the brink. I get all that. But I think that's more of a product of Pittsburgh. Now, it is reported that the defense has finally kind of more bought into the scheme. They're not exactly rebelling against it anymore. They're trying to buy into it. So maybe that's part of the reason why they were able to hold Pittsburgh the way that they were. But I just think that's just Pittsburgh. I really do. I think that's just kind of a product of sometimes Big Ben is a bit erratic in his play. Sometimes the Steelers are an up and down team historically. Under Mike Tomlin with Big Ben, they kind of play down to competition. They play up to competition. They probably didn't really respect the Cowboys, so the Cowboys hung around. And then as for the Giants, I think the Giants are bad enough to lose the majority of their games, but I think they're good enough on defense, and Daniel Jones, he's a turnover machine, but his overall play isn't terrible. I think that they're bad and good enough to hover around that 4, 5, 6 spot, but I like Washington more than them, and I like the Chargers more than them. I definitely like the Dolphins more, well, what should I say, Houston? I guess I like Houston more than them. Maybe if I had to take anything back, maybe Washington. I think maybe if anything, Washington could flip with them, because both the teams are very similar, right? The Giants and Washington are both defensively driven teams. Both of them have very good defenses. It's the offense that's not really carrying the weight. And both offenses turn the football over more than they seem to score. So maybe they could flip, but if I had to say it right now, I would take the Giants to go ahead and hold serve. And then when it comes to the Bengals, Panthers, Falcons, I think that all those teams are just clearly better than the Giants or Washington. And the Chargers are just a mess into themselves. But then you think about who's going to be taking a quarterback. The Jets, yeah, they're going to take a quarterback. The Jaguars, even though I like Gardner Minshew, they're going to take a quarterback. The Cowboys, I thought they were, but the more I listen to Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones come out, I think Jerry Jones just recently went on the radio again, did an interview, and they asked him, right now they have the number 3 pick. Is it crazy to say that they would take a quarterback? And Jerry said yes. Dak is their guy, that they are not going to take a quarterback. And the more I think about the history of the Cowboys, the more I think about their recent history especially, how they pay players, how they get attached to players, how they get attached to coaches, I honestly think I believe them. I believe Jerry Jones. I believe him when he says that Dak Prescott is their guy. And even though I think Dak Prescott deserves to be paid, my question is whether or not he is necessarily a winner. Now back-to-back years, the offense was number 1 in the league, and they weren't winning anything, so I guess it is what it is. The Cowboys don't appear to be taking a quarterback with that pick. I don't know what they do with it. Maybe they take a tackle, because Tyron Smith is no longer a 16-game season tackle. Maybe they move him because he's just expensive. I'm sure somebody out there would like to get him because he'd be an instant upgrade over a lot of players. So maybe they take a tackle. Maybe they just completely trade the pick. And then as for the Giants, are they going to take a quarterback? I thought maybe at the beginning of the season they would. But the more I have seen of the Giants and the more I have seen of Daniel Jones, I don't think so. Daniel Jones is a fumble machine, yes. He is a turnover machine. You know who else was a turnover machine? Josh Allen. Josh Allen, his first 2 years, was a turnover machine. He was a fumble machine. Do you see Josh Allen now? If he was to fumble the football, they're just going to say, alright, get back out there. Guys, this is Daniel Jones' first full season as a starter. This is his first year. He's in a new system, new head coach. There was no OTAs. There was no preseason. Nothing. Let's give Daniel Jones some time. I think they're going to run this thing back with Daniel Jones. This next season, if he continues to kind of do the same thing, I think then they'll look to move off of him. But for right now, even if they get that high pick, I think they like Daniel Jones too much. So if you're telling me in the first 4 picks, only 2 quarterbacks are actually being taken, and it's probably Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. So guys like Trey Lance and Wilson from BYU that they're going to be available. Does that leave room for Washington to slip in and draft one of these quarterbacks? Or does it leave room for a team to trade up and take a QB? And you know what team it makes me think about? It makes me think, honestly, about New England. New England right now has the 13th overall pick. They're 3-5. Third in their division. They're not catching Buffalo. I don't even think at this rate they're going to catch Miami. So, New England with the 13th overall pick. They don't have a plan at quarterback. I don't know if they're going to run this thing back with Cam Newton again. They need a full-on rebuild on offense. Their offensive line, solid. Everything else, you could argue, needs a rebuild. Maybe their running game is fine. Maybe you leave it alone. You let Harris develop. Sony Michel, he's shown he can play at a high level, but he's kind of inconsistent. James White is that third down threat, that scat back. So maybe you leave that alone for right now. But at receiver, they desperately need help. And at tight end, they desperately need help. But the biggest thing we always talk about that a team needs is a quarterback, because you can have everything else be right, but if you don't have the quarterback, you're not going to win on a consistent level. You're not going to win at a high level. You're going to be a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, like the Bears in Matt Nagy's first year. There have been plenty of teams out there that have finished with double-digit win seasons. They're in the playoffs. They are seemingly one of the best teams in the NFL, but they don't do anything because their quarterback is just the war on their team, And their defense and maybe their receivers and the run game have been so good, they've been the perfect makeup. They've been able to cover that wart until all of a sudden it gets exposed, until all of a sudden they can't cover it anymore. It's gotten too big, it's too noticeable, it's too out there. And I don't think New England's going to want to be in that position. Now, New England next season is projected to have, I believe, the 4th most cap space behind teams like the Jets, the Jags, the Colts. They're going to have close to $80 million, something they did not have this time around. Are they going to want to spend $20 million of that on Cam Newton a year? I don't think so. I think they're going to want to look at the draft. And they need the trigger man. So does Bill Belichick say, hey, we got a good offensive line? Let's go ahead and let's draft a quarterback. We'll trade up. I know we have multiple holes to fix, but that is the ultimate hole. Do they go ahead and package their 1st round pick, maybe a 2nd, and maybe even a 3rd? And do they trade up into the top 4 with a team like the Cowboys? Because I know the Cowboys, they're probably going to look at it. They want a new tackle. They want to fill something. They have so many holes to fix, and they seem to want to keep Dak. So I would trade that pick, collect more picks. I think New England is still going to have a middle-of-the-round 1st round pick, so it'll still be a good draft pick. They can find somebody else there. But if I was New England, I would trade up to either the Cowboys or the Giants, and that's when you take your guy. Whether it's Trey Lance, or it's Wilson, or maybe even maybe even it is Justin Fields if the Jags feel like drafting Trey Lance instead. You never know, especially towards draft day. Narrative, stories come out, teams try to put out false information. Oh, we really like this guy. Maybe this guy could go first. There's going to be a lot of mock drafts that have everybody everywhere, right? I'm sure there will be a mock draft somewhere that has Trevor Lawrence not as the 1st overall pick. And in that mock draft, you can instantly throw it away. It doesn't matter. But the number 1 overall pick seems to be unanimous. Everything else is kind of up in the air. So I guess as I look at this, as I look at the top 10, I would just say, Jets, be careful. I see minimum 2 possible games on your schedule that you can win. The Chargers, because they're the Chargers, and the Dolphins, because Greg Williams likes to heat up younger quarterbacks, and Tua is still very, very inexperienced. I think he's still very, very raw. I did like his win against the Cardinals. He looked so much better against the Cardinals than he did the Rams, but I think there's also a big difference between the 2 defenses. The Jets, I think, are just mean enough. They hit hard enough, they hit late, and I think that they could potentially win that game. Be careful. Because when it comes to the Jags' remaining schedule, I do not see a single win. The only game I think they could remotely win, and I don't even know who the hell their quarterback's going to be, is the Browns. That's the only game I think the Jags could win, and I don't know if it's going to be Minshew starting or this kid Lutton. I have no idea. The Browns are inconsistent enough to where they could lose it, but I think the Jags will be 1-15. So, Jets, be careful. Right now, Trevor Lawrence is yours to lose. All you need to do, really, is win 1 game, and you could potentially lose that number 1 pick to the Jags. You could potentially lose it. I don't know how that would all work. I think they go by strength of schedule, so I think maybe the Jets would have them beat there. But I would be careful if I'm the Jets. And if I'm New England, monitor teams like the Cowboys and the Giants. I think both of those teams know who their quarterbacks are. I think the Cowboys are stubborn enough and loyal enough to where they will re-sign Dak Prescott, whether it is to a long-term deal or another franchise tag. And then as for the Giants, I think they're going to give Daniel Jones another season. I don't think they're going to cut bait. I don't think they like the turnovers at all, but I think they see the upside of Daniel Jones, and they think to themselves, if we can do kind of what Buffalo's done with Josh Allen, if we can just correct his fumbling, if we can just correct his decision making a bit, give him some time to grow in the system, better this offensive line, and move forward, I think they probably believe they can win. So can New England finish with maybe like the 15th overall pick and pair that with a 2nd and a 3rd and trade up with Dallas or New York, a team that has multiple holes they need to fix but seemingly have their quarterback? Yeah, I think they can do it. And I think it would be a great choice. And even though New England has a lot of holes to fix and to fill in, still, they got a good offensive line. in putting a young quarterback behind a good offensive line, I think is more important than necessarily making sure you draft a high-end receiver or whatever that might be, right? You can go into free agency. I think AJ Green's probably going to be a free agent. He's older, but you could always sign him to like a 1-year deal, and you give your quarterback at least one decent target. Maybe you could target someone in the trade market. I don't know who all is going to be available. OBJ, maybe Julio Jones. So maybe New England could even swing and trade for one of those guys. I'm not predicting it's going to happen, and it does sound a bit ridiculous, and I agree. It is kind of ridiculous to think so, because, I mean, just how great would that be? In one off season, not only does New England get their quarterback, but then they also get like a true number one receiver still in their prime. It would be ridiculous, but it's the NFL, and nothing about this year makes any sense. So, yeah. Anyways, coming up next, that Saints Tampa Bay game. That finished a bit differently than I thought it would. And on my final topic of the day, we're going to get into my top 5 MVP candidates, so stay tuned for the final topic of the day.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about the top 10 of the NFL draft thus far after 9 weeks, and more specifically about the Jets, Jags, and then, of course, what is going to happen with that 3 and 4 pick. I don't think the Cowboys and Giants are going to draft a quarterback, and I think it's going to leave room for somebody who is quarterback hungry to trade up, and I think New England could be a team to do it. I think they're going to have a pick somewhere between, like, 10 and 20. I think it's going to be around 15, around 16. I think they could pair that with a second and a third. It would take a haul to get to that 3 or 4 pick, but I think they could move those picks over to the Cowboys or to the Giants, and they could then draft their quarterback. They have a good offensive line. You know, the quarterback won't be getting beat up, won't be getting killed behind it. They'll be protected. They won't necessarily maybe have the best of weapons. Maybe they could look to trade for a guy during free agency. Maybe they could look to trade for, or maybe just sign a guy in free agency. I don't know who's going to be available, but I think that there is a possibility for it. Nonetheless, though, let's go ahead and get into this. So, Saints versus Tampa. I thought this game was going to be all Tampa Bay. I did not expect the Saints to be in it. And the reason why I didn't expect the Saints to be in it is because the Saints haven't played well this season, people. The Saints just haven't played well. Every single one of their games has essentially kind of come down to the wire. Now, to start the season against the Buccaneers, like, Brady didn't look good and Breeze didn't look good. It looked like a battle between two old quarterbacks who just couldn't get it done. The Saints won the game 34-23. They then lost to the Raiders 34-24. They then lost to the Packers 37-30. Then they narrowly beat the Lions 35-29. They barely beat the Chargers 30-27. Many people out there believe they shouldn't have even beaten the Chargers. They barely beat the Panthers. They barely beat the Bears. And then all of a sudden, they dominated the Buccaneers from opening snap to the end of the game. The Saints only scored 7 points in the second half. The Buccaneers, that's a perfect opportunity for you to at least make it somewhat competitive, at least do something. You only scored 3 points. on a really dumb field goal. I don't even know why they kicked it. Oh, no, actually, I think I do know. I think they kicked it because they looked at it and said, well, we don't want to have a 0 on the scoreboard. We might as well get 3. Let's go and let's just kick this field goal. And so they kicked it, and it was 38-3, and at least people say, oh, well, at least they scored some points. I don't think that counts. They got destroyed by the Saints. And I don't really know what to make of it. I think, the only thing that comes to my mind is they just don't match up well with the Saints. In watching what I did get to see of the game, the Buccaneers cannot block their defensive front. For whatever reason, Marshawn Lattimore just locks up Mike Evans. Mike Evans in his last 3 games against the Saints, I think he has had like two targets each game and no catches. I mean, for whatever reason, Marshawn Lattimore completely shuts out Mike Evans. So that's part of it. And let me also say this, right? For Tampa Bay, this was their first game with Antonio Brown. The optics on Antonio Brown are not good. They are not good. The Saints' defense is not good. And for it to be Antonio Brown's first game, and for Tampa Bay to score the lowest amount of points that they have all season, 3, in his first game, does not look well on Antonio Brown. Now, I don't think it was his fault. I didn't necessarily see him getting force-fed the ball. What I saw was Tom Brady was off his base. He didn't have time. For whatever reason, Hendrickson, especially against this offensive line, is just unblockable. And Tom Brady threw up some prayers, and the Saints defense was able to answer by getting takeaways. And that was really kind of the story of the game, at least for Tampa Bay. Right? I think Tampa Bay will be fine. Now, Bruce Arians kind of took another shot at him. They brought up Mike Evans and the fact that Mike Evans, he's not getting targeted like he usually does. He's the best receiver on the team. He's not getting the production. What's going on? And Bruce Arians said, oh, he's been open a lot. He's just not getting targeted. So he's kind of taking another shot at Tom Brady. And I don't know if Tom Brady's going to respond to him at some point. I don't know how that quote's exactly going to sit in the media. I would imagine it's not going to sit well with most people. They're going to say, Bruce, didn't you learn your lesson the last time you spoke out against Tom Brady involving Mike Evans? Remember, you said Tom Brady threw a terrible interception and it was all on him, and then you reneged on it. You came back and you said, like a referee, upon further review, it was actually Mike Evans' fault and not Tom Brady. Sorry, Tom. I just think this is just kind of Bruce Arians, and I think this is Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is a team with a lot of firepower on both sides of the ball, but they're very inconsistent. And while Tom Brady has kind of bucked the trend of quarterbacks leading the league in turnover-worthy plays in a Bruce Arians offense, this is now at least 2 games this season, both against the Saints, where this bombs away offense has kind of come back to bite Tom Brady. He hasn't looked good. I think it's just a matchup problem. And the Saints right now, they have the lead in the NFC South. And I don't know if I'm going to necessarily say they're going to keep it, but as much as I rag on the Saints because of how inconsistent they have been, just how different they look this season, they're 6-2. And even if all their wins are close, they are pulling out the victory. They are figuring out ways to win these games. Sean Payton's a good head coach. Drew Brees is still at least a decent upper-tier quarterback, not a top 10, but he's a decent upper-tier quarterback who still makes good decisions with the ball, and Kamara's great, and Emmanuel Sanders is great, and Michael Thomas is great, and the offensive line is not as good as it's been in the past, but still decent. Kamara's on like a record-setting pace right now for running backs catching the football out of the backfield. And I guess kind of speaking on Michael Thomas, right? My takeaway from the Saints is, my God, as I said, the optics on Antonio Brown aren't good. The optics on Michael Thomas are outstanding when it comes to the Saints. Michael Thomas sees the field for only the 2nd time this season. And the Saints have their most dominant victory of the season in a game where Michael Thomas, I think he caught 5 balls for like 50 yards. The attention Michael Thomas gets from defenses just changes their offense. He gets so much attention, everybody else gets open. Drew Brees, once again, is targeting everybody. Every single receiver he could possibly have on the field, he targets because they're open. because Michael Thomas attracts all the attention. And I do want to say, though, that makes me worried about the Saints, because in every other game this season, they have not looked dynamic on offense. It has taken them to the second half. They've had to scratch and claw for every single yard, for every single point. This is the most effortlessly it seems to have come from them. So I guess it's good news. Michael Thomas is back. You're assuming he's fully healthy. You can have him for the remainder of the season. But if he does get hurt again, and if he does need to take more time off and he misses more games, I'm concerned about what the Saints offense is going to look like. Because you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of the OBJ effect in New York. Eli Manning, before he got Odell Beckham, was starting to look like he was kind of on the downside of his career. There were rumblings, maybe it's time to move on from Eli Manning, he doesn't seem to have it anymore, the stats aren't good, this isn't good, that, and then he gets Odell Beckham, and Odell Beckham is breaking records, and Eli Manning is putting up great numbers. His ratings, everything when he targets Odell Beckham were outstanding, and Odell Beckham made people think Eli Manning was once again a really good starting quarterback. Because he was just so good, he made Eli look excellent. Eli could throw it anywhere around him, and Odell Beckham for the most part was going to come down and catch it. It's kind of the same thing with Michael Thomas. Drew Brees this season has not been the same guy. The last 3 seasons, Drew Brees has been a perennial top 5, top 10 quarterback graded by QBR or Pro Football Focus. This season, he hasn't been that. All of a sudden, he gets Michael Thomas back, and Drew Brees destroys the number 1, number 2 defense in the NFL, just completely annihilates them. With the help of Tom Brady, of course. But you can't tell me that's not a bit concerning. You're telling me that this one receiver makes this big of a difference? You've got all these other weapons on this team. It makes me think, does Drew Brees not trust some of these other guys? Does he have that much trust in Michael Thomas and not really in the other guys? Is there a play calling problem? Did Sean Payton completely change his offense to be based around Michael Thomas? What is it? How different do defenses play the Saints without Michael Thomas? I have no clue, but it does make me question that. And as for the Saints defense, right? Don't get too bought into this. You look at the Saints, they played a great game. The defense came alive. Don't look too much into it. The Saints otherwise have not been a good defense. Their secondary ain't the same. The linebacking core doesn't really seem to be the same. Neither is the pass rush. The only thing that this team does really, really well is they stop the run. And they've done that consistently for the last few seasons. They've been really good against the run. Outside of that, they're not that great anywhere else. So, this is kind of one of those outlier games. This is just a bad matchup for the Buccaneers. But for the Buccaneers right now, right, if the season was to end, right now they would be a wild card team. And I don't know if Tampa Bay is built and has the kind of mental toughness. I don't know if this is a team that can go on the road game after game after game and consistently win. I think Tom Brady's that kind of guy. I think he's the kind of quarterback, but everybody else, I don't know. Throughout the history of Bruce Arians, his teams have always been kind of labeled as a bit more loose. They're a bit more susceptible to penalties. That's just kind of a Bruce Arians team. And while Tom Brady has changed that, there's only so much you can change in a system that has been the same way since the dawn of time, right? Since the dawn of Bruce Arians' time in the NFL. This has been who he is. And this is the way his teams have been. So I don't know how much Tom Brady's going to be able to change that. But you'd have to ask yourself, if assuming that the Bucs are a wild card team, they're going to go on the road against Seattle. They're going to go on the road against Green Bay. They could go on the road against the Cardinals. Against the Eagles, maybe. I would take them against the Eagles. But against these other teams, against the Cardinals, I think Kyler could dominate that defense. Do I think he would? Maybe not. But he could. Russell Wilson? I think that'd be a hell of a game. The Packers? I think Rodgers is licking at the bits to get another shot at Tampa Bay because they absolutely embarrassed him. I don't know. I think Tampa Bay is one of these teams where they need to play at home. I really think they need to play at home if they hope to have any hope of making it to the Super Bowl. They need to win their division. They need to be one of the best records in the NFL. If they're a wild card team, I think they get beat. My whole thing about them making it to the Super Bowl and ultimately maybe winning it was predicated off of them winning their division and just getting home game after home game after home game. I don't know if Tampa Bay is a team that can go on the road week after week and win consistently. I think Tom Brady is that guy who can do it, but it's all about the rest of the team. And I don't think a Bruce Arians team is made for it. I think they're too inconsistent. And you can go ahead and disagree with me, but that's my point of view. Anyways, coming up next, final topic of the day, we're going to get into my top 5 MVP candidates of this NFL season. I'll explain who they are, why, I have a reason for all of it. We'll get into it. You can disagree with me, but it's my list. I will explain everything, and thank you for tuning in.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about the Saints and Tampa Bay. When it comes to Tampa Bay, I think this is just kind of the team that they are. Wildly talented, but also wildly inconsistent. I think they're going to show up more games than not. Obviously, the record dictates that, but the Saints and them are just a bad matchup. Tom Brady, for the first time in his career, has been swept by a division opponent. The Saints are just a bad matchup, right? Their defensive line, Tampa can't block them, and when it comes to the Saints, I just think it's amazing that Michael Thomas comes back, and in his first game back since injury, the Saints have their most dominant game of the season. Offensively, they were great. They kind of did whatever they wanted, and that has not been the Saints team this year. It reminds me a lot of the OBJ effect with the Giants. Eli Manning looked washed, and the offense just didn't look good. They get OBJ. All of a sudden, the Giants are one of the more fun offenses in the league. They're one of the more high-scoring offenses in the league because of how the defense basically adapts to trying to defend OBJ. It's the same thing with Michael Thomas. Not necessarily a good thing, but I guess as long as they have Michael Thomas, the future does look bright for the Saints, at least for this season. Anyways, let's go and get into this. My final topic of the day. My top 5 MVP candidates. I'm going to go from 5 to number 1, and just know this is all my own opinion. I'm taking into account team record, what the player does for their team. I think I maybe have maybe a player that's going to shock you that I have on this list, and then everyone else might just be subject to being moved around, maybe just in a different position, but I think overall I have the same kind of MVP list as most other people. I didn't look at any others. This is all just based off of my opinion, so we'll go ahead and let's get into this. So, at number 5, I have Alvin Kamara. And I'm sure that probably shocks some people, but I have Alvin Kamara as my 5th overall player for MVP this year for these reasons. He leads his team in the following categories: rush attempts, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, receiving yards, receptions, 60 on the year so far, targets, 71, he has 8 touchdowns, he leads the NFL in scrimmage yards. Oh, and by the way, his team is number 1 in their division. And I know some people might say like, oh, well, he's just a cog in the machine. He's the whole offense. He's the leading receiver. He's the leading rusher. His targets on the year are 30 more than the next closest player, and that's Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Sanders has 41 targets on the season. Kamara has 71, and some people might want to say it's because Drew Brees' arm isn't what he used to be. He can't just keep going downfield. He wants to check it down to Kamara, and that might very well be true. But Kamara consistently, year in and year out, has been either the first or second best pass-catching back, probably the first, second, third best all-around back when it comes to rushing and catching the football. He doesn't really get hurt. He's usually healthy. And this season, he has been the Saints' entire offense. If Kamara was not their running back, for all these games that they've been missing Michael Thomas, I'm not sure the Saints have this record. I'm not sure the Saints win the way that they do with only Latavius Murray and no Alvin Kamara. I just don't think they do. So I have Kamara as my 5th overall player for the MVP award. I think he's incredible. I think he's probably the best back in football. And this year, I mean, he's on pace, I think by Pro Football Focus it said, he's on pace to basically shatter the records, receiving-wise, for a running back. He is incredible. And if you watch the Saints this season, you can't tell me he hasn't been the whole offense. I mean, it's like Russell Wilson with the Seahawks. He has been the whole offense. So I have Alvin Kamara at number 5. And number 4, I have Josh Allen. Now, some people might want to move him higher. Some people might want to move him completely off the top 5. Some people might even say Alvin Kamara should be higher than him. I have no idea, but I think that Josh Allen is a top 5 MVP candidate, and here's my reasons why. He's the 5th ranked quarterback by Pro Football Focus. He's 3rd in the NFL in passing yards, 19 touchdowns to 5 interceptions so far, which is on pace to basically shatter his own single season record for his own touchdown to interception ratio. He's on pace to shatter his completion percentage, his yards per game. Here's what's crazy about Josh Allen. His first 2 seasons in the league, he never had a game of 300 yards passing minimum. I'm not even talking about just going over 300 yards. He hasn't even hit 300 yards. This season, he's not only hit it, he's eclipsed 300 yards 5 times. The story for Josh Allen this season, and we all know MVP, a lot of it is narrative. The story for Josh Allen this season is great. He's been the best quarterback in the NFL off play action. Off play action, he's number 1 in yards, completions, and touchdowns. His team is 14th in the NFL in points per game, the number 5 offense by Pro Football Focus. They're first in their division at 7-2, and it seems to be theirs to have. Doesn't seem like anybody's going to catch them. Miami maybe has a chance to. Doesn't seem like they're going to. This Bills team is going to be a double-digit win team. They're finally going to win the division, and it's not because of their defense. The Buffalo Bills defense is 25th in yards and is 19th in points allowed. The Bills defense that was there Josh Allen's first 2 years of his career is gone. Even though the players are all still there, the defense itself, how well it's performing, is gone. I don't know what happened to it. They're just not the same. Tre'Davious White's kind of in and out of the lineup, and I get that hurts. They lost Levi Wallace, I think, before the season began, and that really hurt. But it has not been the same defense. It's been bad. The Bills have had to get in shootouts to win these games, and Josh Allen's been good enough, and the offense has been good enough to where they've been able to win these games. 7-2 on the season so far. They're gonna win their division. And Josh Allen, by far, if he keeps up at this pace, I mean, he'll be north of 4,000 yards for the first time in his career. He'll be north of probably 30 touchdowns, probably on pace for like 8-9 interceptions. He's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So I have him at number 4. At number 3, I have Aaron Rodgers. Number 1 quarterback by Pro Football Focus. He's 9th in yards, 24 touchdowns to 2 picks. He's 6-2, 3rd scoring offense, 2nd graded offense by Pro Football Focus, the highest graded QB in the second half of games. So when the game gets a bit tighter, maybe second half adjustments, that's when the defense starts to try and make some changes against you, tries to trick you, tries to deceive you, get the better of you. Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback in the NFL in the second half of games. He looks at whatever adjustments you've made and he goes, hey, I've made my own adjustments, and he still beats you. And let's not forget the story of Aaron Rodgers this season. Coming into the season, oh, Rodgers, he's a bit older. He seems to be breaking down. Oh, whoa, the Packers, they've drafted his successor. Jordan Love, this is probably Aaron Rodgers' last year, if we're being completely honest. Jordan Love's probably going to take over next year because he's a rookie. They took him in the first round. Hell, they traded up to get him. Did you hear Aaron Rodgers? He said, man, I needed my 4 fingers of tequila. It was that kind of a night because they drafted him. And look at what Aaron Rodgers is doing. He looks like the Aaron Rodgers of old, and he's not leaning on the defense. What Green Bay defense? The only thing Green Bay's defense is good at is in yardage. In terms of yardage, they're good. Points allowed, they're like 17th in the NFL. And if we really look at the 2 games that the Packers have lost this season, can we put them in the proper context? The Buccaneers loss, yes, that was bad. Aaron Rodgers looked terrible. That is his one really bad game this season. The other loss to the Vikings, that was not Aaron Rodgers' fault. That was the Vikings running the clock out with Dalvin Cook and Green Bay's defense inability to even lay a hand on him. That was not Aaron Rodgers' fault. Aaron Rodgers that game played pretty damn well. It was not his fault that they lost that game to the Vikings. And also, by the way, Dalvin Cook, people need to put a bit more respect on Dalvin Cook's name because he is also up there. I think if you had to, I don't know what the polling looks like for MVP right now. I don't know what the odds are. I'd like to see Dalvin Cook's odds. I don't think he's going to win it. I don't think he'll even have a shot to win it. But when you look at the Vikings with Dalvin Cook and without him, it is night and day. They are such a different team without Dalvin Cook and with Dalvin Cook. But nonetheless, I have Aaron Rodgers as my third place player for the MVP. At number 2, I have Patrick Mahomes. I don't think a lot of people realize this about Patrick Mahomes' offense this year. Do people realize that the Chiefs' offense is number 1 in terms of yards, and it's number 2 in points? I mean, their offense has been good. And what I kind of realized, well, I guess I'll get to that part after I say all the rest of these stats. He's the number 4 quarterback by Pro Football Focus. He has 25 touchdown passes to 1 pick. 25 touchdown passes to 1 interception. He's second in the NFL in passing under pressure. He's the 5th highest graded quarterback in the second half of games. The Chiefs are 8-1, and what I'm realizing that's happening is there's just Mahomes fatigue. It's kind of like that same thing with Michael Jordan. It's the same thing with LeBron James. Patrick Mahomes, his first season as a starter, 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns, MVP, number 1 seed, a pre-snap penalty away from going to the Super Bowl, in which he probably would have won it if that Rams team showed up against the Chiefs that it did to the Patriots. Now, the Patriots had a way better defense. I'm not even going to try and compare the two. But if that Rams team came out even a little bit flat against the Chiefs, we all know the Chiefs can absolutely shoot out and they can win those games. Now, it has been shown those aren't the kind of games that the Chiefs really want to get into. They'd rather be able to control the game and not have it be a shootout, but they can win shootouts. I firmly believe the Chiefs could have won the Super Bowl against the Rams Mahomes' first year. Then once he do his second year, his numbers fell down a little bit. People thought he wasn't exactly the same. Oh, this wasn't really his year. I don't know. This wasn't really the same kind of Mahomes year. It seems like the league kind of figured him out. That was funny. Yeah, that's hilarious. He went on and he won the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl MVP. And now this season, he's doing Mahomes things again. The Chiefs, 8-1. 8-1 on the season. And their one loss was to a Raiders team that actually has a really good offense. That's his one loss on the season? Okay. I mean, whatever. I think what people are starting to do is they're starting to take Mahomes for granted. This kid is incredible. He's the most talented quarterback in the NFL right now. I will still take Russell Wilson over him, but Patrick Mahomes right now is that dude. I don't know if he'll ever have another season where he goes 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns again. I don't know if the Chiefs want to have him be around those numbers ever again. But the fact is, I know he can do it. If the Chiefs wanted to really go to a pass-first offense all the time, which they don't seem to want to do anymore, they are trying to actually make an effort to run the football, we know what he can do. I think what's going to happen to him is the same thing that's happened to LeBron, is the same thing that's happened to Michael Jordan. As the seasons go on, there will be years where he is by far and away the best player in the NFL, and he's not going to win the MVP because he just didn't have that kind of season. Like, he didn't top the record. He didn't top himself. You know, the story's not always gonna be exactly what the media can latch on to and what everyone can latch on to and hug tightly and never let go. There's many better stories than Patrick Mahomes. But you can't deny his play, and you can't deny the results. The Chiefs, as long as they have him, and as long as they have Andy Reid to pair with them, I'm sure another head coach could work with him, but Andy Reid with Mahomes is definitely preferred over many, many other combinations. As long as these two are together, they will dominate, and this Chiefs team is not going to go away. Unless all of a sudden, they just become horrible at drafting, and the team just falls apart as Mahomes gets more expensive, they will always be in the thick of things to win it all. Okay, so, at number 1, I'm pretty sure most of you can kind of figure it out. At number 1, I have Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is still 3rd in the NFL in passing yards. 28 touchdowns to 8 picks. Those 8 picks are not pretty. His interceptions have shot up. In just 2 games alone this season, he's thrown 5 of those 8 interceptions, but he's still the number 2 quarterback by Pro Football Focus. They have the highest graded offense in the NFL. They're number 1 in points per game, and I'm going to latch onto this until the cows come home. His defense is 30th in the NFL in points allowed, on top of being the 32nd ranked overall defense. There is a petition right now by Seahawks fans to get Ken Norton fired. That's how bad it's gotten. There is a literal petition that you can go look up and sign to get Ken Norton fired. Seahawks fans are fed up with it. This defense wasn't this bad last year. And now we got Russell Wilson bailing water out of the team, and he's trying so hard to bail water. He's working so hard. He's pressing so hard that now, on top of scooping water out of the boat and dumping it out, he's scooping water back into the boat. He's trying so hard. All these interceptions, these turnovers, he's pressing so hard. He's hurting his own team at times. Do people realize? Okay, so as I said, Seattle is the 30th ranked defense in points allowed. So only 2 teams rank worse than them in terms of points. The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Dallas Cowboys. Look at their combined record. These 2 teams have combined to win 3 games. Seattle has doubled their win total. Combined. That's what Russell Wilson has done. Dallas and Jags, what's the thing they both can't do? They can't really score. What can Seattle do? Score. And they need to score. Now, I do believe what some analysts are saying. I believe Seattle needs to change their offense to be a more ball control offense. But that doesn't mean, in my opinion, run the football. It means shorter passes, quit looking for the long ball to DK Metcalf, short, intermediate stuff, get out of bounds, things like that. I think they need to do more of that. They need to save their own defense. If they could, I would like them to be able to play a style of football similar to like the 2016 Cowboys. Remember when they won the division, Dak Prescott's rookie year? Dallas had one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Now that season it was ranked really good, but it's because they weren't on the field that much. So the defense was always healthy. They were always super well rested, and they could fly all over the field, and they could force 3 and outs. But when you put that defense on the field over and over and over again, and they're not very talented, they're going to get exposed. And that's what's happening to Seattle. They're scoring at such a great clip, and it's really helping their team, but it's hurting their defense. I believe they need to change something. But Seattle, if they want to go to the Super Bowl and Russell Wilson wants to win that MVP, they need to start winning games again, and they need to just perform better. They just have to, and it might take them firing Ken Norton. It might take them firing their defensive coordinator, because it's not working right now. This is the worst I have ever seen Seattle's defense. I mean, really, this is the worst I have seen it. They made some really interesting free agent signings. They let some guys go that I didn't think they should let go. They brought some guys in that I didn't see them bringing in. I like the trade for Jamal Adams, and I like the pickup of Dunlap, but are they going to help the team enough to where they're going to be able to, win a Super Bowl? I just don't know. I just don't know. But as it stands right now, with the way that the division is, they're still number 1 in their division. They're still one of the best records in the NFC. And Russell Wilson has been the whole show for Seattle. I have him as my number 1 player for MVP. I'm sure some people disagree with me. I'm sure some people think I'm just being a homer or I'm playing favorites. It's just, look, I'm watching the games. I see what he has to work with. I see what Kansas City has to work with. They have about the same on offense. Some people might even say that Seattle has better on offense, but defensively, it's not even close. Even with Green Bay, it's not even close. Even with Buffalo, it's still not even close. Kamara, he's a running back, so I don't think they're gonna give it to a running back again unless that running back does what Adrian Peterson did, right? Unless they run for north of 2,000 yards, I just don't think it's gonna happen again. Or they shatter the NFL rushing touchdown record. I just don't think it's gonna happen again. But I have him at number 5. Honorable mention to guys like Dalvin Cook and Tom Brady. So Thursday Night Football, Colts, Titans. I will take the Tennessee Titans to win that game. I think Phillip Rivers will have a turnover or 2. I like the Titans secondary. Don't really like anything else about the defense, but I like their secondary. I think Rivers will throw a pick or 2. I think that the Colts are just a bit too inconsistent of a team. And when it comes to the Titans offense, Tannehill in his last game, he didn't look super great. There was a point where he was like 5 of 15, so it wasn't his best showing. The Colts defense is great. Pro Football Focus says it's great. The stats say it's great. I think Tennessee wins a closer ball game. It is a division rivalry, so there's always that chance for something crazy to happen, but I will take Tennessee to win that game, and my next podcast, we will talk a little bit about the Colts because they are a fascinating team. Anyways, thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.